Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Vagabond VC. This is season 2, where I'm covering the African continent. We're still focusing on South Africa, where I've been based for the past couple of months. At the time of this recording, I am in a town called Port Elizabeth and currently dealing with something called load shedding, when the country's electricity provider will randomly turn off the grid to conserve power. It's taken a little getting used to over the past few months and has been difficult for getting work done, but it does provide a good opportunity for me to edit these episodes. Today's episode features Andrea Böhmert. She's a partner at Knife Capital. We conducted this interview last month in Cape Town. Knife Capital is one of the original South African VC firms, so Andrea has a lot of insights to provide about the ecosystem. Really excited to bring you this episode today. So without any further delay, I give you Andrea Böhmert. I'm here with Andrea Böhmert. She is a partner at Knife Capital. We're here in Cape Town, South Africa. Andrea, thank you for joining.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for traveling to Cape Town, I think, and being interested in our ecosystem. So really looking forward to it.
Oh, well, yeah, I came here specifically to see you. So this
Sure.
is So, I want to jump in and just get a quick background on you. So let's get an introduction on who you are. And I don't think anyone really, as a child, is like, I want to grow up and be a VC. And there's a lot of different ways to enter this ecosystem. So I'd love to hear your journey and how you kind of got started, involved with startups and in venture capital.
Sure. So you're 100% right. I think if you would have asked me as a teenager, venture capital, I would have not known what it is. And I think even if you would have asked me 20 years ago, I would have known what venture capital is, but never ever pictured myself to kind of go and be in there. So as one can hear from my accent, I am not originally from South Africa. I am from Germany, grew up there, and straight after university came to South Africa for an internship. So I always kind of go and tell people, be very, very careful when you take an internship. You might actually kind of go and, it might not just be a 3-month little thing, just saying. So did an internship here. By pure chance, met somebody from a recruitment agency who then kind of go and offered me or facilitated a job, and I kind of thought, I'll do this for 2 years, and then go back to Germany. So worked for a large corporate, Siemens, 5 years up in Johannesburg, then moved down to Cape Town to go and work for a large IT company. So I considered myself at that point in time as a real corporate animal. I actually loved working for corporates. And to be honest, I actually loved corporate politics. For me, it was a very intriguing kind of thing. I enjoyed all of that. However, decided to kind of go on my own, because the last company that I worked for was a big IT company. And I saw so many young IT entrepreneurs who were fantastic when it came to tech, but not so much about business. So I thought there's an opportunity. So with 3 other kind of partners, I started a consulting company. And what we did is we said, well, let's kind of go and help young IT entrepreneurs. We bring the business, they bring the tech, and let's kind of go and do this. And of course, they can't really kind of go and pay you your typical corporate salary. So we got a little bit of equity in those businesses, and that's how it started. And with some of them, after a while, they became so successful, they needed venture capital. So this is now in 2006, 2007. So now the company needed venture capital, and we found out there is hardly any venture capital in South Africa. And definitely not for like early stage tech companies. So went out, spoke to many kind of South African financial institutions, said, don't you want to kind of go and give us money for a VC fund? And got politely told, absolutely not. Venture capital in South Africa can't work. This is Silicon Valley, but not Africa. It's like very cute, but no thank you, won't do this. So I remember one weekend I sat there and I was like, okay, if I can't raise the money from South Africa, well, I have to raise it from overseas. Now, being German, I thought, okay, so who do I know in Germany who has money, who loves South Africa? Because if I still have to convince you of South Africa, you know what, it will take years. And here I found Hasso Plattner. Hasso Plattner, the founder of SAP, one of the co-founders of SAP, one of the wealthiest men in the world, had just started his VC fund in Berlin, and he owns property, which I knew. He owns a big golf estate in South Africa. So I knew that he liked South Africa. So I went into LinkedIn and I kind of go and said, well, what is it? How do you kind of go and contact somebody at SAP? And it's first name dot surname at sap.com. So I put together an email to Hasso Plattner saying, can you please go and support a VC fund in South Africa? And he gave me 25 million euro. And that's how I kind of got into VC.
You make it sound easy.
To be honest, naturally between writing the email and launching the fund, there were 9 months in between. But it is like that. I wrote an unsolicited email and got a response, and within 2.5 months we had the go-ahead. Yes, we are going to do this, and then it took time to set up the fund, to do all of this and so on. But yes, that's how I got into venture capital.
I hope my path to actually having a fund is going to be as easy as that, but I don't think so.
The problem is that I've tried this strategy again, just sending emails. Yeah. It has never ever worked like that again. Okay. So unfortunately, I cannot see that it's a repeatable business model.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is really how I got into venture capital.
That's a great story. And let's talk more about Knife Capital itself then. So when did you get started? And let's talk through the fund that you invest out of, your typical check sizes, your thesis, what companies you look for, and what are some standout features of maybe a company or a founder that Knife Capital specifically is looking for when they make an investment?
Sure. So Knife Capital is actually now 12 years old. I was not one of the founders. I joined Knife Capital about 1.5 years later. I joined them in 2011 as then one of 3 partners. So we are kind of one of the oldest VC firms here in South Africa. We've always invested in innovation-driven, technology-enabled tech startups. We've never done seed investments, so we've always been let's say the early Series A. However, what is a Series A in South Africa is not the same as a Series A in the US in terms of check size and so on and so on. So I think one just needs to kind of go into, but we've never done I have an idea like pre-revenue. So we've always only come in post-revenue. Sometimes revenue means 1 or 2 clients, so very early stage, but because none of us has a technology background, we always said we need to have at least 1 client where we can see it works. The value proposition is there. That doesn't mean that there's product market fit, we get that, but at least there's 1 or 2 kind of clients who were prepared to kind of go and pay money for something and so on. So we've always done this. Interestingly, I think that's maybe one of those slightly controversial things, because a lot of the media talks about Africa rising and the rising of the middle class, and therefore a lot about the B2C opportunities in Africa. We are normally absolutely focusing on B2B. We believe there's a B2B2C kind of thing, but we believe that pure B2C, the customer acquisition cost versus customer lifetime value, is a very, very tricky thing here in Africa. So normally it's always been around technology companies who have product market fit in South Africa with the potential to go into other markets. Whether the other markets are the rest of Africa, emerging markets, or the rest of the world, that's totally different. But it really is about, well, can they kind of go and make it here? Do we have some of those proof points, and then can we kind of go and take it? Now, the interesting thing about ticket sizes, and that I think is one of the biggest differences when it comes to your international audience and what they're normally kind of going to use to. The average South African VC fund is about $10 to $15 million. That's the fund size. Now, if you think about that, you want to kind of go and have a bit of a portfolio play, so you do 10 investments. And if you then think about the fact that you normally don't want to kind of go and invest more than 20% of your fund into one portfolio company, it kind of goes and shows you the ticket size that we normally are able to kind of go and pay out. And I think that, of course, also very, very much influences what kind of companies you can really kind of go and invest in. Now, having been in this space now for the last, about 14, 15 years, the ecosystem has shifted a hell of a lot. And also with that, of course, the way that a company like Knife Capital invests. So right in the beginning, the first fund was a $10 million fund. With a $10 million fund, we actually did 7 investments. Actually, that was the predecessor to before I kind of got involved. And I think that the great thing about this fund is actually that we exited all our companies and exited to the likes of Visa, to General Electric, a 55% IRR. So really managed to kind of go and make this a story where we can prove that venture capital in South Africa can really kind of go and work. Next fund was a 250 million rand fund, which comes to about let's say $15 million, and that fund is now kind of fully invested. But again, the ticket size that you normally talk to is between $500,000 and let's say $2 million. So the challenge with those investments is you can get a company with that amount of money in South Africa definitely to a nice point. But the moment you want to go international, the moment you want to kind of go and expand, well, you need to kind of go and put in far more money. And what was missing in South Africa, and it's only in the last 2-3 years kind of coming up, was who is a company that actually can go and which VC fund can sign a $5 million, a $10 million, $15 million kind of check size. Because what we kind of found is that our real successful companies, they are now going international. They're competing international, but they're also competing international against companies that actually have raised 10, 20, 30, $50 million. I mean, so you're really not on an equal footing and trying to kind of do this. So with Knife Capital, we are currently kind of on our third fund, and now we are raising a $50 million fund to be able to kind of go and exactly do this, start becoming the bridge between Series A and Series B, being able to kind of go and put in $5 million into a company, co-investing with international investors to be able to facilitate and be, let's say, the local anchor investor into international expansion rounds. And that's really our strategy.
I think that's pretty common when you see, not just in emerging markets, I think even in developed markets, when at least with emerging fund managers, when they have to start off with small ticket sizes, smaller funds, and as they get a track record, they're able to grow their funds and not only create larger ticket sizes for the first check into a company, but also for follow-on investments, right? And support the portfolio company. So I think that's a pretty natural progression for VC. In terms of your portfolio, are there any recent investments that you want to highlight? Any companies you're really excited about?
They are so different. And you know what? The problem with this question over this, it's like when you have children, you can never say which one is your favorite child, because then the other one gets kind of very, very upset. So I think the interesting thing for us, of course, is that also, if you look at COVID impacted some of our companies in a super negative manner, and others it worked extremely well. And it's for us, it's very interesting to kind of go and see the different companies, the different business models, and what works and what worked at what times. So, for example, one of our first investments in this fund was a company called Quicket. Quicket is the long tail of ticketing. Now, Quicket was doing extremely well until 2 weeks before COVID. No, actually, it was doing well until kind of COVID hit, and within 2 weeks, they lost 98% of their revenue. 98% of their revenue. We were about to kind of go and start consolidation in the market, buying some of our competitors. I mean, that's how well they were doing, and then it went down to zero. And then you kind of go into the first lockdown and the second lockdown, and you can't have events, and this was it. The last 3 months were the best months ever and ever, ever. So they have totally recovered from this whole COVID kind of thing, and they are doing so well. So it's very interesting to kind of go and see a company that was on the rise, then got absolutely rock bottom smashed, and they pivoted their model slightly, they added kind of certain functionality, and here they are back again. So that's a very, very interesting one. But then we are invested in a company called Snaplify, which is really an education platform that really looks at Africa. It's got the largest library of educational content in Africa. And they, of course, when everybody went into online learning, started booming across through COVID. I mean, they, on one day, just signed up 800 schools, just like that, because schools just said, well, we need e-learning kind of context and so on. So again, totally different thing. I mean, here we're sitting in the office of Data Profit. Data Profit is one of our portfolio companies, and they're doing AI for manufacturing. Their client is 90% international. It's really focusing on AI and process optimization, and it's about yield increase, reduction of defects, really playing into the sustainability kind of angle. And very interesting when you kind of go and speak to companies overseas, and they kind of say, AI from Cape Town, really, can that work? And you kind of go and work again with a perception of what is a typical African kind of startup, but they are World Economic Forum tech pioneer. I mean, the AI top 100 CB Insight. I mean, so it's an interesting one when you kind of go and have a hardcore technology company sitting here in Cape Town and really kind of going for the international markets. So I'm just saying, so there we've got Stone 3, who is very, very heavily involved in the mining industry and really bringing kind of AI and machine learning into that sector, into the work health environment. I think the beauty of our portfolio is that they're very, very diverse, and it's very interesting how they play into the different niches.
Very diverse, and then also, like you mentioned, very tech heavy, right? Very scalable tech heavy solutions. I'd like to, before we get into the ecosystem, I'd like to touch real bit on Grindstone, the accelerator program that's partnered with Knife Capital. What's some of the history with Grindstone, and how is a typical program run at Grindstone? How does the relationship between the accelerator and the VC fund kind of operate?
So when you are in VC in Africa, in South Africa, or saying when you're in venture capital in general, remember you say 90 times no and only 1 time yes to a company. So over the years we saw amazing companies, and quite a few of them were simply too early for venture capital. They were simply not investment ready. And we can talk about, again, how the ecosystem, particularly in the past, didn't kind of go and help people there. But we said at the time then saying, well, to some extent, if we want to build venture capital up as an asset class, we need to feed the pipeline. We need to kind of go and make sure that those entrepreneurs who really have something interesting but are not investment ready get investment ready. And at that point of time, there were a number of incubators in South Africa who really helped you from, I have an idea, to maybe minimal viable product. But there were nothing for scale-ups. There were nothing for companies who had all of this but now needed help with the next step. So we decided as one of our side projects to kind of go and set a certain percentage of our time, like the Google 20%, kind of said, well, let's say we take 20% of our time and really focus this on developing the ecosystem, developing our own pipeline if you want to. So we said, okay, we are going to work with 10 companies per year. We are going to work with them for 9 months. So it's not a quick fix kind of thing. We are going to go and analyze all the companies right from the start. We developed a little tool that was 400 questions that they had to kind of answer, and we would see with each company. So you are good at finance, but terrible at marketing, and your HR processes are not good. But kind of go and say, well, if for companies to go and scale, normally they are good at their core product. I always use the muffin baking kind of example. If you are into muffin baking, most likely your muffins are really, really good. You are good at that. If not, to be honest, get out of business. But are you good at selling it? Are you good at recruiting the team around it? Are you good at the financials? Are you good at all those various areas about it? And we're saying, for a company to scale and get investment ready, you need to have those various pillars there. So we created Grindstone to go and help 10 selected companies every year to get their pillars right. Because once you've done this, you can pass the due diligence, you really know where your weaknesses are, and from there on you can kind of go and scale. So we started this in 2014. So we are currently running Grindstone 9 and 10. We were very, very lucky. We got funding from the SME fund to kind of go and start duplicating, so not just taking 10, but actually 20 companies per year. And it really is about finding those next future stars and help them to kind of go and get sustainable or funding ready. And that's really what we are focusing on. So far, we have invested ourselves in, from a knife point of view, in 2 of those kind of companies. So yes, there are our pipeline to some extent, but it's actually far more to really kind of go and build the ecosystem. What we then found out last year was that some of those companies really need a little bit of money. Not the money that we could kind of go and spend, but they needed the seed funding. So we have started now Grindstone Ventures, which is just able to kind of go and put a little bit of 1 million, 2 million rand into those companies to kind of go and help them on their way to actually getting ready for the next rounds and doing this. So Grindstone is for us a mixture of ecosystem development, developing pipeline, and really making sure that entrepreneurs get the right opportunities and get the right access to, for us it's about knowledge networks and funding. Well, the funding is one thing, but you also need to really get access to the knowledge and the networks. And if you can kind of go and do this already in Grindstone, well, that sets them up for success.
Understood. No, thank you for the clarification on that. And, you're finding even now, there are programs in the U.S. where I'm from where like Andreessen Horowitz set up an early stage, basically like accelerator. Like everyone is trying to add as much value to the ecosystem as possible, whether it be through just capital or through these other programs that are helping with the pipeline or just develop entrepreneurs. So yeah, no, that's great. Let's jump into the ecosystem a bit. You kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, for example, when you were talking about a question like, oh, an AI company coming out of South Africa, right? But let's kind of jump into maybe more in depth about that specific area or, another misconception. But what are some common misconceptions about doing business as a startup here in South Africa?
So I think the misconceptions that there are from the outside is that a lot of people see Africa as it's all about impact and it's all about solving problems with simple solutions. Now, don't get me wrong, I think there is definitely a big solving Africa's problems with African solutions, and that is a big part. And the impact is undeniable. And I really don't want to kind of go and say anything bad about it, because it is super, super, super important. But you can't just kind of go and with a stroke say African innovation is only about that. So if you're going to go, we are here in Cape Town. I think the beauty about South Africa, and definitely the beauty of Cape Town, is you have a very clear first world component. And you do have undeniably also a third world component. And I think because both of those exist in South Africa understands both worlds. And therefore, yes, we are absolutely able to go and use high tech to solve African problems, but we are equally able to kind of go and use super technology to solve problems that exist all over in the world, because we don't just look at everything from an Africa kind of lens. And I think that's when always a little bit of the surprise comes when you go and you attend a conference in the US or in Europe and you kind of go and say, we are from South Africa. It's a little bit like, well, you have to prove yourself 10 times better because there's this, well, really? Like, do you have access to skills? Actually, access to skills is one of our core advantages, because we are not. If you were a startup in Silicon Valley, you compete, first of all, against the Googles and against all those. And there comes the next level. A normal startup gets, we say, the D skills or the E skills, because the top ones just get poached by some of the others. In South Africa, we don't do this. So we actually have access to the A skills at a cost level that, of course, is much lower. So, but it is around those kind of perceptions of what Africa is all about and what technology in South Africa is all about, which is one of those challenges that you have when you really go to market, and because you need to kind of go and work with that. So that's one of the things that's definitely an interesting thing that I think is wrong. I think the other thing that is wrong is, I think it was McKinsey, definitely one of the big ones, who wrote this big article about Africa rising and the rise of the middle class, which makes everybody kind of think that B2C is so easy in Africa because there are so many Cs. But the Cs are very diverse, and you really need to kind of go and understand market segmentation extremely well. And you can't just kind of go and take a business model that works perfectly in the US or in Europe and think you can just go and plant it into Africa. That absolutely doesn't work. And we see quite often, we see business plans trying to go and do exactly this, and we just totally shy away from them because, as I said, it doesn't work.
Yeah, a blanket statement like that, it totally ignores a lot of different variables in these target markets. Yeah. No, thank you. That's really insightful. So you've been here as a VC for, like you mentioned, almost 14 years now, right? So what challenges about being VC do you think that you underestimated when you first got into this business? Specifically when it comes to South Africa, like what challenges did you underestimate about being a VC in South Africa?
So investing is easy. It's very easy to go. I mean, there's enough companies out there. There's enough to do your due diligence to go. Investing is easy. Scaling and exiting is a totally different thing. Now, the scaling, if you really kind of go and look at it, so the market in South Africa is relatively small. The market, if you go into the rest of Africa, is very diverse. It's not like, you know what, you go into Africa. You go into different cultures and different languages, just because it works in South Africa doesn't mean it works in Botswana, doesn't mean it works in Nigeria, and so on and so on. So the scaling international is difficult. To scale into Europe or the US and so on, you are far away. How do you scale when you have $2 million in funding and you scale into a market where $2 million is nothing, compete against companies that had $50 million? How do you go and do this? You need to think out of the box. You need to think differently. You can't use a cookie cutter way of doing things. So I think that is something that I think we all underestimated. We are doing it now, but 14 years later. I'm just saying. So, no, and we've always done it, but it's definitely not as easy. So this whole thing, I mean, at the end, why are you a VC? Because, I mean, somebody gave you money and you have to go and you have to deliver returns. And you deliver returns by scaling your companies, making them successful, then you exit. Now, again, if you think about exits, the exits that everybody wants with the right kind of multiples will most likely come internationally. So again, if you have a totally local play, it's going to be relatively difficult. So we know that we have to invest in a company here in South Africa, scale them internationally, and then attract a way to kind of go and realize our returns most likely international. And we've done it, can be done, but it is not as easy as if you're sitting in Central Road. You're going to go and, you know what, I remember first time I went to San Francisco and attended one of those pitching sessions. 10 companies, 8 of them didn't even mention a market outside of California. I mean, if a South African company would come in here, would pitch to me and would not mention a market outside of the Western Cape, or even South Africa, I would throw them out of the room. So
California's 40 million, Cape Town is 4 million, right?
But the point is, the scale in the US is just so much of it.
Right.
So you can be successful by purely staying in, if you want to, in California, and your exit might be in California because it's all there. South African companies do not have that luxury. And I think it's always so interesting when people start comparing South African VC with American VC. You're not comparing apples with apples. What we have to do is 100 times harder than what you have to be there, because you are immediately outside of your comfort zone, and you need to kind of go and compete there, and you need to make it there. And I think this is something that not too many people really recognize, acknowledge, and I think it is something, of course, that we underestimated when we kind of go. So when I sent this famous email, did I kind of think about how to exit all the company internationally? No, I didn't.
So one of my questions I had here was, what are some of the biggest roadblocks, right? And so you just answered some of that, which is, you know, scaling companies. You have to start off a company with a scaling mindset because the market size here just isn't big enough. What do you think would be one of the solutions to that? Is it simply just a gap in funding, or you mentioned startups have to think outside the box. So, okay, they have to get these networks in these other economies to expand there, right? So what are some of the solutions that can help them there? Is it simply a matter of just getting more funding here, or is there something else that we're missing?
So, I mean, first of all, but that's going to be the answer that everybody's going to go and give you is, our government doesn't make it particularly easy for us to kind of go and to do business. We have exchange control rules, we have problems or difficulties recruiting skills from outside of South Africa in terms of labor law and work permits and so on. So, I mean, so there's a lot of things that could be made easier just here, absolutely. In terms of roadblocks, so for example, trying to go and raise money overseas. So even if we kind of go and say, you know what, we are going to go next round, we are going to go and put money in, but we need now international investors to kind of go and put in. The first thing that they're going to go and say is, oh, you're registered in South Africa. No, don't like that. So you need to be registered Europe or as Delaware. Well, there is a big problem with our reserve bank exchange control, how to kind of go and do this. And so it's super difficult. It's not impossible, but it's definitely not easy to kind of go and do this. So the point is to go and do the next step. It is difficult for a South African company to look cookie cutter enough for a US VC to say, I'll do it, because they've got so many other companies to invest in. So to kind of go and invest in a South African one, should I really kind of go through this process of reserve bank? Should I really kind of go and do this? No, they need to kind of go and do this. The founders need to kind of go and move. Do you have enough traction in the US? It's these kind of things to kind of go and do that definitely are not easy. And that's why those who make it, I mean, it's actually quite impressive. They really make it well.
The reserve answer is really interesting because it has so much to do, and you mentioned this earlier in your answer too, with government policy. So obviously there are some challenges there. Is there anything that the government has been like doing to help facilitate these, to help with foreign direct investment, or whether it be even just the ease of starting and growing a business? Like, it's just really, okay, you're shaking your head no. So
no, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a big initiative at the moment in South Africa to come up with a Startup Act, and the Startup Act would kind of go and facilitate and solve many of those. And there's definitely a willingness from certain areas in government to listen, to kind of go and do. And I think I'm just a very impatient person. I mean, if I really look at it over the last 14 years, a lot has happened. I just want it tomorrow. I don't want it in 5 years. So do I believe we are going to get there? Actually, I do. Can it please happen tomorrow? Unfortunately, I don't think so. So
regulation is typically a slow-moving process.
So I think the point is, I think everybody realizes the power of an entrepreneurial ecosystem. This is where job creation, that's where innovation kind of happens, and government is absolutely going aware of it. And I think we also have to be mindful that, of course, our government in South Africa has got a lot of different issues to kind of go and solve for. So one needs to kind of go and just look at it. So I think things are moving in the right direction, but in an environment like venture capital where things are just fast, it goes too slow.
It's funny because you brought up your impatience, because I want to respect your time, so we're getting to the end here. So to close this out, I want you to take out your crystal ball and tell me, what do you see the South African startup ecosystem? Where do you see it 5 years from now?
So COVID has done something amazing. It has done a lot of bad things, but COVID has changed mindsets. It has changed what people have just taken for granted. It has asked people to reflect. So first of all, in a time where everybody was on Zoom or whatever, whether you were 500 kilometers, 5,000 or 5 meters away from someone, was the same. So I think distances mean less now, which I think is good for Africa. I think that more and more people are now willing to kind of go and do what they're really passionate about, and that means there's more entrepreneurship. I believe that government is coming right. Too slow, but it is coming right. So I believe that there is a strong that this support is coming. And interestingly, I think the world is changing its perception when it comes to Africa. So international money is also coming in, and I do believe that also slowly, but the world perception of Africa, and to be honest, thanks to people like yourself who are telling the stories, is changing about what is possible here, what we can do. So I honestly believe that particularly entrepreneurship in Africa is going to go and grow significantly. I think a lot of people just do not want to work for corporates anymore. They are very happy to kind of go and work for startups. I think attracting skills from all over the world to work remotely is going to become easier. Doing business is going to be easier. I think access to money is going to become easier. So therefore, I am actually very, very positive about the future. However, particularly given also what's currently happening from economy and everybody was ever talking about this, I think while entrepreneurship is definitely increasing, I think this hyping up of valuations and building businesses based on vaporware and of course that's now a very harsh comment, but yeah, I think those times, I mean, not over, but have changed. I think what we're going to see is the rise of real good fundamentally, or businesses that are built on real fundamentals, that really kind of go and add a certain amount of value, and I think there it's going to increase. Definitely here in Africa. So I think there I'm super optimistic, but I do believe that you need to have a real business model. You need to figure out how to make money. I think the next few years, I don't see that much money going into, you know what, I'll just give me money, I'll figure out how to make money in 2-3 years' time. I think that time is at the moment a bit over.
So I think that in general, that was a very hopeful answer, which you need to be if you're in this business, right? But if people want to, whether it's a startup trying to learn more about Knife Capital or apply for funding, or anyone wants to reach out to you for anything on Grindstone, what would be the best way to reach you or Knife Capital?
I mean, naturally, of course, there is a website, knifecap.com and so on. I think the best way to actually go and get hold of me is really to go to my LinkedIn profile and kind of connect with me on LinkedIn.
That's how I did it.
That to be honest, is the best way to really go and get in touch with me. If you want to go and get in touch with my colleague Kiert, then follow him on Twitter and respond to his tweets. But but I really think sending a blind email can sometimes just, the info at, of course, we look at, but it's just one of those things. So I personally believe the best way to really go and get hold of us is connect on LinkedIn.
I'll add the links in the show notes. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time. This has been really helpful. I love being able to sit here in person. You know, you mentioned how COVID changed everything, but we're able to actually do this. Yeah, just really appreciative of your insights and your expertise on the ecosystem here. So thank you very much.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. Well, thank you for talking to me.